end up in the field come from different places where sometimes they either decided that they need to change to something more creative, or if they just don't fit in other circumstances. And I think I have a little bit of both. By profession, I am a social worker. I worked as a therapist. I worked in school settings, in hospital settings, mostly with children and youth. But I also needed a place to kind of be more creative. In New York, everyone have either a side gig or just some sort of a hobby that they dedicate a big part of their life to. So for me, that was comedy, and I really like the scene here, and you get to meet a lot of different people from different backgrounds. The field of improv really helps with dealing with mistakes because it accepts them as part of the process. And what you do with mistakes is you use them to discover new things. And I think that's really the key with mistakes, is if we have tools to deal with them when they happen, because they're going to happen. There's no really way to avoid mistakes. As long as we have tools, we can handle them, any kind of mistakes that come in the way. And in improv, I don't want to say that mistakes are encouraged, but I think they kind of are. If you make a mistake, you either try and find some sort of an angle, some sort of funny angle about what happened, or you just move on, depending on the situation. What happens in the process, especially in improv, is it teaches you to stay in the moment. So when you really go, into the real life and you talk to people, when you make mistakes, you don't necessarily dwell on them. You just move on, or you take those mistakes and you play with them. So you kind of learn how to take a mistake and just spin it around instead of saying, oh, I misspoke, or I said something that I shouldn't. You just learn how to react to that in that moment. First of all, I'm exposed to a lot of things that you won't be exposed in other fields. But also social work gives me a different angle on life and on relationships between people. So I feel like my angle is a little bit different. And it helps in comedy because in comedy you try to punch up. And as a social worker, you see a lot of the injustice in the world. So it makes it easier to recognize when you see injustice. And then the comedy part is to spin it into a funny bit or, some sort of funny observation. I mean, both of those parts are part of what I am. So, I have to kind of combine them. It happens naturally in the brain, so I don't really think about it. Laughing at myself is absolutely an important tool in comedy. And I have to admit, it's not always easy. You go through life, sometimes you can have a period of time where you really don't want to make fun of yourself. So so you try to go a different path. But laughing at myself for me is going back to a lot of bullying that I went through. So taking back those moments and kind of spinning them into my own benefit while recognizing my weaknesses, it definitely helps, I guess, self-esteem as well, but just take better control over your life. I think one of my favorite jokes is after graduating from social work school, I really struggled to find a job, and I found myself working in a restaurant, which was very humbling, especially, you get a master's and you expect to work in the field. But I had to work in the food industry at the register of a falafel shop, and you get treated a different way when you work at the register. People really look down to you, and I guess I forgot, because I had that experience in the past. And I spun it into a joke about how I can do really more than just selling falafel, right? I was acting out a situation with a client that seemed very nervous, and I was offering my help as a social worker, and all he said was, no, I'll just have the hot sauce, please. First of all, I think you can write a joke about any topic in the world, but a lot of it depends on who you are. And we have to admit that there are certain jokes that we cannot tell because we don't really have the full picture and the full understanding. But I think you have to really make sure that you're telling your own perspective of what you see. Before you decide to write a joke or make fun of other people, you really have to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, why am I trying to tell this joke? And I think that's really the key part. And sometimes it's curiosity, and it's okay. It's a lot of times it's coming from our own prejudice, and that's something that we need to deal with. A positive outcome that came from a mistake, that I do have actually a recent story. My wife and I have a small business where we sell food, and I had an order for a Russian borscht, just a classic beetroot soup. And I was cooking it, and while I was cooking it, I realized I don't have any tomatoes in the house, and I needed about a good 2 pounds of tomatoes. At the spur of a moment, I had a Moroccan-style tomato jam that I made, and I had a lot of it. So I took a big part of that and I put it in the soup and I mixed it, and it turned out not bad at all. And right now it's one of our best sellers at our food stand. So sometimes you just have to roll with what happens. You know, you made a mistake. I didn't update my shopping list, and I had to think of something. We call it the Moroccan borscht. I think my only advice is that accept that mistakes are going to happen, and also accept that sometimes you're not going to respond well to those mistakes, and you can always revisit that. And what's important is to really think forward and try to learn from every experience.